In the pale, hollow light of morning, I sat alone in the living room, wrapped in silence as familiar as an old shawl. The quiet stretched endlessly, broken only by the faint, steady ticking of the wall clock. Outside, the garden basked in fragile sunlight, untouched and calm, as if unaware of the storm that had quietly taken root inside these walls. I took my usual seat by the window, hands resting lightly on my lap, but the stillness that once brought comfort turned cold with a weight I could scarcely name. My days had always been steady, defined by routines so simple they felt like a comforting rhythm. The slow brewing of tea, sorting the mail, tidying bills. Routines that kept the chaos of life at bay. Yet that morning, all that fragile peace broke with a single, icy message. Damon was gone. The words pulsed through me, harsh and sudden. Damon, my son, the boy I raised and loved, had vanished, escaped to a life I could barely imagine, far from here. They told me he was indulging himself in luxury, the kind I never afforded, funded by the one thing I had guarded most fiercely, my lifetime savings. The bank account we had carefully built, the fruit of decades of sacrifice and quiet toil, was emptied, gone with him. At first, disbelief surged. This must be a mistake, a cruel error in the records, or perhaps some twisted joke. My hands trembled, clutching the cold message as my mind refused to accept what lay plainly before me. How could he do this? How could the son I raised betray me so deeply, shattering the trust that had been the foundation of our family? I did not scream. I did not rage or confront. Instead, I folded inward, retreating into 1,000 broken pieces of a mother's love betrayed. The grief settled low and thick in my chest, a weight that pressed the breath from my lungs. Tears welled silently, but found no voice, swallowed by the oppressive quiet around me. But beneath the grief and the shock, a different feeling began to grow, cold, sharp, and unyielding. This wound, this brutal act of betrayal, was not the end. It was only the beginning. As the light outside faded into the dim shadows of evening, I realized that this pain was not just an end, but a beginning. I did not need to shout or cry out. I needed to watch, to wait, and to plan. Damon's disappearance left the house eerily empty, but his absence sharpened my senses. The silence around me was no longer a refuge. It became my ally, my weapon. In that stillness, I began to see clearly the magnitude of what had happened. The life I had painstakingly built, the secure nest I had crafted with love and care, was under attack. Every corner of the house whispered stories of sacrifice. The worn armchair where I sat had supported me through years of hardship. Nursing a sick husband, soothing a restless child, enduring long nights filled with worry and pain. The photographs lining the walls bore witness to times when love and hope were enough to shield us from the world's cruelty. But Damon had turned away from that, choosing selfishness and greed instead. Anger simmered beneath my sorrow, quiet but fierce. This was not mere loss. This was a betrayal so deep it cut through the marrow. They saw my savings as nothing more than an easy prize, an inheritance to be plundered without a second thought. But they did not understand that beneath my quiet exterior lived a strength forged in silence and patience. Their greed blinded them to the fact that I had centuries of wisdom, legal acumen, and experience quietly woven into every decision I had ever made. I spent hours sitting where I had first received the message, letting wave after wave of emotion wash over me. Night fell, the darkness outside deepened, but inside me a new light began to burn slowly, a spark of determination, cold and steady. This was not defeat, it was awakening. I would not give them the satisfaction of watching me crumble. My silence was not surrender, it was preparation. I thought back to the countless sacrifices I had made for Damon and Lisa. Every skipped meal and sleepless night, the invisible work that had built this family's foundation. Those memories were like bricks in a wall I erected around my broken heart. The ache was raw, but beneath it lay a steady resolve to reclaim what was mine. I understood then that my silence was not absence or weakness. It was a tool, a careful, watchful patience that would serve me better than any outcry. They had made a grave mistake underestimating me. In the stillness of that morning, I mourned the son I thought I knew, yet I also found within myself the first stirring of rebirth. The quiet in my home was not empty anymore. It brimmed with a calculated calm, a silent storm gathering strength. Silence was my only weapon, and I would wield it without falter. The days that followed Damon's betrayal stretched endlessly, each one blending quietly into the next. I kept my lips sealed, guarding my anguish behind a carefully crafted mask of composure. No whispers of accusation, no tearful outbursts escaped me. When friends called or stopped by, I smiled and nodded, speaking just enough to avoid suspicion. Sympathy was not what I wanted. Control was. Control over the chaos that had invaded my life. Control over the path I would take moving forward. In the stillness of the house, I found myself replaying every memory, every moment long past that had built this family's fragile foundation. The sacrifices made in silence, the nights spent nursing my late husband through illness, the countless quiet efforts to shield Damon and Lisa from pain and want. As those memories unfurled, a deep ache settled alongside a fiery resolve. Those years of hard, invisible labor had been erased from their minds. The years Damon and Lisa chose to trade for a reckless, greedy escape. For so long, I had justified Damon's reckless nature as youthful indiscretion. But this was something darker, betrayal laced with cold calculation. They had taken my savings, not as heirs of a loving family, but as thieves, blind to the strength I kept beneath my calm surface. They had underestimated a mother's quiet power and the legal knowledge I'd painstakingly acquired over decades. Surrounded by the worn volumes of legal and financial texts, reminders of the years I'd spent safeguarding our future, clarity began to surface from the storm inside me. I studied bank statements, contracts, property deeds, searching for clues and hidden protections. What stunned me was discovering the depths of their assumption, how confidently they had rated the primary account, sure I would never know or never act. But they hadn't accounted for the second account I had set up years ago, sealed behind layers of legal complexity, a fortress built from secrecy and subtlety. This decoy fund became my beacon, a promise that not all was lost. Though the primary account lay barren, the hidden savings remained untouched, a stronghold to reclaim what was stolen. I tightened my grip on that knowledge, holding it close like a lifeline through the dark days. Next, I summoned Margaret to my side, my longtime friend, my trusted lawyer. Her office, heavy with the scent of leather-bound law books, became the command center for our quiet campaign. I laid out the evidence, the missing funds, the documents, the photographs of Damon and Lisa's indulgent travels charged to my name, the careless messages that betrayed their greed. Margaret's steady voice cut through the swirl of my emotions. This is more than theft. It's fraud. It's a violation that we can fight and win, she said with resolve. There was no empty comfort in her tone, only the hard light of strategy. Together, we began drafting the plan, a careful, silent assault to expose the truth and reclaim what was mine. No public drama, no angry confrontations. Precision and justice would be our weapons. While Damon and Lisa basked in their ill-gotten luxuries, unaware that the walls tightened ever closer, I cataloged every asset tied to my legacy. The house itself became a vault of memories. My husband's watch resting quietly in its case, heirlooms passed down through generations, pictures of family milestones carefully preserved. To them, these may have been just objects, but I knew they were far more. They were the history they had tried to erase. Tracking their spending became a quiet obsession. I noted each extravagant dinner, every event ticket purchased with my name. Their sense of entitlement blinded them to the trail they left behind, a trail I planned to follow patiently and without haste. Pain and betrayal burned deep, but I refused to let fury erupt into chaos. My anger was tempered and quiet, a slow burn refining my will. I would not crumble under their treachery. Instead, I transformed my despair into vigilance and purpose. Days turned into weeks. I consulted Margaret repeatedly, reviewed documents and bank activity, moved deliberately and discreetly to lock down any remaining funds. The urge to call Damon or Lisa, to confront them with words, flooded through me, but I swallowed it. Too soon, and their cunning might allow them to slip further away. I learned that patience was a silent weapon, one far stronger than the noise of confrontation. My heart ached not only with loss, but with a growing, unshakable determination. I was no longer the mother who gave without question. I was a woman armed not just with knowledge, but with the law on her side, and a resolve that would not break. The house remained calm on the outside, the familiar comforts unchanged, but inside, every quiet moment was a battle, every breath measured. Friends came and went, unaware the woman before them was preparing a reckoning that would strip Damon and Lisa of their false security. When shadows of doubt crept in, I clung to words my own mother once told me: patience is the sharpest weapon, and silence can be the loudest roar. My silence was both refuge and strategy, a fortress I built brick by brick. Damon and Lisa thought they had won, that my quiet was submission. But they had made the gravest mistake. I was readying not for a clash of anger and tears, but for a revelation so complete and undeniable it would shatter their world. And through it all, not a single word escaped my lips in accusation. Silence remained my first and fiercest weapon, and I would wield it with unwavering precision until the moment to strike came. The quiet passage of days steadily sharpened my focus. What once felt like an overwhelming loss transformed into a slow-burning fire of determination. Damon and Lisa's reckless steps into extravagance were now moves I tracked with careful calculation, turning their confidence into a dangerous liability. I was no longer the grieving mother shattered by betrayal. I was a woman rebuilding her power, fortified by the knowledge that every reckless purchase, every boastful post, was a clue unraveling their illusion of impunity. The decoy account I'd established years before, shielded by legal subtleties and layered protections, was no simple safety net. It was a fortress, the foundation of the plan that would bring Damon and Lisa's carefully constructed world crashing down. This moment was mine to shape, and I had chosen my allies carefully. Margaret, more than a lawyer now, became a partner in my silent war. We convened regularly in her office, a sanctuary lined with books and the scent of aged paper. I presented the damning evidence: bank statements chronicling lavish restaurants, designer boutiques, private jets charged to accounts they presumed mine but no longer controlled, messages dripping with entitlement and disdain for the family who had nurtured them. Margaret listened, her voice firm and unwavering. "This goes beyond theft," she said. "It's fraud with consequences that reach far deeper. We'll freeze assets, file liens, initiate proceedings that will compel them to answer, but timing is key. We must approach this carefully, strike when our impact will be greatest." Her measured approach steadied my swirling emotions. I understood this battle was not won with outbursts or emotional confrontations, but by a deliberate sequence of moves executed with precision. The law was my battlefield. Every document, every signature was a weapon I wielded with increasing confidence. Damon and Lisa believed themselves victorious after emptying the obvious savings. They were blind to the existence of the decoy account, the silent fortress I built in secret, protected by myriad measures Damon could neither foresee nor circumvent. It remained intact, a lifeline I held close, a promise that not all was lost. While they continued their reckless indulgences, oblivious to the storm gathering, I cataloged every family treasure, every heirloom preserved across generations. The house, our home, was no longer just a building, but a vault of memories and values they tried to erase. My husband's watch, delicate and worn, rested safely in its case. Photographs chronicled the decades of love and sacrifice. The weight of these precious objects gave me strength. Tracking their spending in silence became almost a sacred duty. Each extravagant dinner, every event ticket purchased and shared publicly, every whispered boast on social media, each was a careless thread I followed patiently, knowing that while their arrogance blinded them, their trail would never truly disappear. Though betrayal and pain burned fiercely within me, I refused to let rage dictate my actions. I softened the fire with quiet control, refining my anger into a steady determination. I would not fall apart under the weight of their treachery. I would transform despair into vigilance and strategy, becoming immovable and resolute. Weeks passed. Each meeting with Margaret strengthened us. We meticulously reviewed documents, locked down remaining funds, and carefully planned each legal move. The impulse to confront Damon or Lisa rose within me, fierce and urgent, but I stifled it. The time for words had not yet come. My silence was a weapon far more powerful than any shouted accusation. My heart ached, not just for what was lost, but with a firm, unyielding resolve. I was no longer the mother who gave blindly and trusted blindly. I was a woman armed with knowledge, backed by law, and fortified by unbreakable determination. Outwardly, the house seemed unchanged. Its walls echoed the same soft familiarity. Inside, every breath was cautious, every moment a silent confrontation with the storm building beneath calm surfaces. Friends and acquaintances came and went, oblivious to the quiet reckoning taking shape behind smiles and polite conversation. Doubt sometimes crept into my mind, but I clung to my mother's wisdom. Patience is the sharpest weapon, and silence can be the loudest roar. My silence was both a shield and a strategy, a fortress constructed brick by brick, layer by layer. Damon and Lisa believed my quiet was weakness, submission. They had made the gravest error. I was preparing not for a fracturing of broken hearts, but for a revelation so complete it would shatter their world and leave no shelter for their lies. Not a single word of accusation escaped my lips. My silence was my first and most powerful weapon, and I intended to wield it with unwavering precision until the moment to strike had fully arrived. Our plan expanded beyond freezing accounts. Margaret and I mapped injunctions to encumber all properties, including those Damon and Lisa's frivolous spending had purchased in their names alone. We spoke of fraud charges, of demands for restitution, of the legal chains that would bind them, stripping away hope of escape. Documenting the history of the family home became an act of defiance. I photographed each heirloom, each precious memento. More than objects, these were symbols of endurance. Damon and Lisa could never erase what those objects represented. I preserved the legacy with reverence and resolve. Their careless arrogance extended to their online presence. Social media posts flaunted their lavish life, a parade of luxury. Each photo, each detail became evidence. They exposed themselves unwillingly, blind to the consequences. Sitting one evening at my husband's old desk, I read over a letter Margaret had drafted to the bank, notifying them of our legal actions. The letter was cold, factual, and absolute, a hammer blow delivered quietly yet with force. I folded it carefully, imagining Damon's shock when he found the accounts frozen, the titles encumbered, his freedom to spend my legacy cut away. He fancied my savings a treasure chest for his plunder. Soon, he would learn it was guarded not merely by locks, but by the law, by patience, and by a mother's quiet fury. In this slow but steady campaign, I had become the architect of their ruin. The reckoning would not come with drama or tearful pleas, but with the undeniable and unforgiving power of truth and justice. Damon and Lisa could not outrun it. They could not silence it. When the time came, I would stand calm, collected, unbroken. For silence, which had been my only weapon until now, would ring loudest when it shattered their world. Each day passed with quiet purpose as I moved through the house that held the fabric of my family's history. The light filtering softly through the windows cast gentle shadows on walls that had witnessed joy, sorrow, and years of unwavering love. These rooms weren't just four walls and a roof, they were a living chronicle, a testament to resilience and sacrifice. Every piece of furniture, every photograph, every heirloom carried with it the weight of memories Damon and Lisa had tried to erase with their greed. But I was determined this legacy would survive. With methodical care, I began cataloging the house's treasures as if I were preserving a museum. Each item I documented was a symbol of endurance. My husband's worn watch rested safely in its velvet case. The faded photographs encapsulated decades of laughter and hardship. And the delicate porcelain we had cherished for festive evenings was recorded meticulously. These objects were not just material possessions. They embodied the life my family had built, the love I had protected, and they were now part of my quiet defense. Margaret and I intensified our meetings, planning each legal maneuver with precision. The initial step, freezing obvious bank accounts, expanded into a comprehensive effort to encumber every property linked to Damon and Lisa, including those frivolously acquired under their names. We reviewed documents, prepared injunctions, and filed claims that would legally bind their assets, stripping away their access and freedom to squander what was not theirs. More than property, these were the threads of their illusory security, and we were unraveling the entire fabric. Aside from property and finances, we carefully explored evidence of fraud. The legal path was fraught with complexity, but Margaret's expertise transformed these obstacles into tangible wins. Restitution claims, fraud investigations, and eventual charges were all on the horizon. After years of silent suffering, I was finally using the tools I'd learned to wield: the law, patience, and relentless determination. Throughout this time, Damon and Lisa behaved with reckless disregard. Their opulent lifestyles were broadcast openly, each moment of extravagance captured on social media. They flaunted their gains with careless pride, unaware that their very arrogance was exposing them to the consequences that awaited. Every tagged location, every flashy post was a thread that tied them ever tighter to the legal nets we had woven in silence, tightening invisibly but irresistibly. Their impudence was bitter to witness, yet it only made the pattern of their undoing clearer. I found a grim satisfaction in seeing their false triumph laid bare in evidence. I did not gloat aloud. My satisfaction was of a quieter nature, a steady flame illuminating the path to justice. One night, enveloped in the serene hush of the house, I sat at the old oak desk my husband once used, the grain of worn wood familiar beneath my fingers. Before me lay a letter Margaret had crafted, its crisp folds a contrast to the weight of the emotions it carried. The letter was addressed to the bank, stating plainly and firmly that all accounts connected to Damon and Lisa were frozen, that legal claims would encumber the family home, and that the lavish lifestyle sustained by stolen funds would no longer be tolerated. This was the opening salvo of the quiet war underway, a hammer blow made with cold precision. I pictured Damon's shock upon learning his spending freedom was over, that the foundation he had leaned on was now locked tight by legal authority. For so many years, he had believed the savings were a treasure trove he could plunder without consequence. Soon, he would learn how meticulously protected that trove had been, guarded by far more than mere vaults, by laws, by unseen barriers, and by a mother's relentless patience and resolve. The campaign was slow and unrelenting. No heated confrontations or public accusations marked its progress. Instead, every signed document, every frozen account, and every lien placed was a strategic strike, the demolition of Damon and Lisa's greed in small but fatal increments. This was justice in its purest and most powerful form, wrapped in silence and enforced by law. While the house remained a quiet sanctuary, holding on to memories and sacred space, the legal processes moved steadily forward. Each week, Margaret and I met to assess our progress and adapt our strategy. The tangled web Damon and Lisa had spun came further into focus. Undisclosed loans, dubious transactions, and reckless purchases funded by deception. Each detail strengthened the evidence, bolstered my resolve, and layered the impending consequences with undeniable weight. This house, once a battlefield of silent pain, was now my fortress of quiet strength. I could hear the familiar sounds, curtains brushing softly in the breeze, the distant creak of floorboards, and feel the steady pulse of memories embedded in its walls. It was a sanctuary and a witness, holding fast in the face of betrayal. I was committed to allowing the legal process its necessary pace, understanding that haste would only erode the meticulous structure Margaret and I were building. Emotion had no place here. Patience was my most lethal weapon, and silence the shield I wielded with unwavering steadiness. Every message from Margaret, every legal filing sent, moved us closer to the inevitable moment when Damon and Lisa would face the undeniable truths they so desperately tried to hide. It would be a moment without tears or screams, just the cold clarity of justice delivered with calm hands. I often imagined that day, Damon's face paling with disbelief as he realized the accounts were frozen, the titles encumbered. The whispers spreading through the community, the slow disintegration of their carefully crafted facade. Their bravado would crumble in the face of truth. They had thought my silence meant surrender, my patience weakness. They had been cruelly wrong. Their reckoning would arrive like the inevitable tide, unrelenting, unyielding, and complete. The silence that had shielded me in the darkest hours would soon erupt, loud and clear, to shatter the world they had built from lies. When that day arrived, I would stand strong, calm, assured, and unbroken. For this silence, my greatest weapon so far, would announce their downfall with the fiercest sound of all, the truth. The day Damon and Lisa returned was cloaked in their usual false confidence, an arrogant insistence that nothing had changed, that their exploitation had left no scar. They stepped through the door with the casual grace of those accustomed to entitlement, expecting the world and me to bend once again to their desires. Their voices rang out, confident and light, unaware that beneath the surface a tide had shifted, poised now to sweep away their illusions. I did not greet them with shouting or tears. No frantic accusations or desperate pleas escaped me. Instead, I wore a calm so profound it unsettled them more deeply than any outburst could. My eyes held steady, my expression cool but resolute, revealing none of the turmoil roiling beneath my surface. Damon's fly grin wavered the instant he recognized this was not the mother who would plead or shout. Lisa's composed facade cracked for just a moment, fleeting but unmistakable. The air between us was thick with an ominous silence, one that spoke of reckoning without a single word. With deliberate steadiness, I placed into Damon's hands a letter, folded neat and heavy with consequence. It was the first real blow in this quiet war. The bank's official notice that all accounts tied to them were frozen immediately, access revoked legally and irrevocably. The financial lifeline sustaining their opulence had been severed. The house, their assumed inheritance and playground, was shackled by liens and legal claims so binding they could not be ignored or defied. Damon's face drained of color as the weight of their reality dawned, disbelief giving way to panic. His usual arrogance faltered, his words stumbling as he grappled to regain control. Lisa, for all her practiced poise, could not mask the growing fear in her eyes, the dawning horror that their carefully constructed world was collapsing before them. "Your greed blinded you," I said softly, my voice steady, yet carrying the full force of final judgment. "You believed my savings were yours for the taking, a limitless treasure to spend without consequence. But you did not know that your mother's silence was a shield, a fortress built with patient hands and unbreakable will." There was no malice in my tone, no venom, only a cold inevitability that left no space for denial or deflection. The quiet in the room pressed down heavy, suffocating, more powerful than any shout. Damon's eyes no longer held defiance, but the raw exposure of reckoning. Lisa's shoulders sagged, the weight of guilt settling upon her. I unfolded the truth in stark detail, every fraudulent transaction, every extravagance paid for with what was never theirs, every callous message that had been sent under the guise of family loyalty. I revealed the decoy account, a hidden stronghold Damon had never known existed and which now sealed his fate. The secrets Damon and Lisa had hoped to bury lay exposed to the harsh light of justice. This reckoning was not confined to our walls. Letters and documents reached family members and respected members of our community who had been kept in the dark, stirring ripples of disbelief and dismay that soon grew into murmurs of condemnation. The social fabric Damon and Lisa depended on to shield their actions began to unravel just as surely as the financial. They tried to speak, weak defensive attempts to justify their theft and betrayal, but the truth was a hammer too heavy to counter. Their silence in the face of utter exposure said everything. The damage they inflicted was no longer private. It was a public disgrace that echoed beyond numbers into their very identity. In the midst of this storm, I felt an unexpected release. Years of unspoken pain and quiet endurance culminated in a moment not of vengeance, but of testament, a mother's patient strength, laid bare and triumphant. No tears fell then, those were spent in solitude long ago. No screams tore the air, just the cold and final justice that spoke louder than any emotion. I stepped back, leaving Damon and Lisa to face the collapse of the fragile empire they had built on dishonor. Around us, the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, standing once more as a sanctuary of truth and resilience, a monument to endurance. In that silence, I understood deeply that silence had never been absence or weakness. It was the voice of triumph, a quiet roar that would not be silenced. And in this stillness, I found the peace I had sought for so long. In the quiet that followed their departure, a profound calm settled over our home, different from the heavy, hollow silence that once lingered. The air felt lighter, the rooms breathed more freely, as if the house itself exhaled after carrying the weight of so much pain and betrayal. Standing by the window, I watched the garden bathed in soft evening light, the flowers my husband had lovingly tended still blossoming, resilient as ever. It was a reminder that life, even bruised, finds a way to endure. Walking through the familiar hallways, memories surged, some aching, others comforting. This house, once marred by shadows, was now a sanctuary reclaimed by truth and resilience. Every photograph, every worn piece of furniture, every faded cushion bore witness to years of love, sacrifice, and quiet devotion. Damon and Lisa had attempted to erase these threads with their greed, but they remained intact, woven into the very fabric of this home. Reflecting on the long journey here, I felt the weight of every silent tear, every sleepless night. The silence that shielded me, the patience that armed me, and the cautious strength that transformed my pain into justice, all of it converged in this moment of peace. Their betrayal was a deep wound, yet it sparked a hidden strength I had never truly acknowledged before. There was sorrow, yes, that it was tempered by relief, a release from the burden of secrecy and broken trust. Grief would always be part of my story, but it no longer held me captive. Now space opened within me for hope, for healing. I pictured the future, days when worry might yield to quiet joy, when fear would be replaced by sovereignty over my own choices. Though the path ahead was solitary, I was not alone. The house offered a steady, loving presence, wrapping its walls of memory and endurance around me like a protective embrace. The garden beyond, flourishing despite the season's shifts, mirrored the renewal blooming within my heart. Silence, once my refuge, had become my voice. Where words might fracture, silence built. Where cries could weaken, waiting empowered. I breathed in that strength, whispering to myself the truth forged through hardship. Silence was my only weapon. Through this weapon, I was free. Turning from the window, I stepped deeper into the home, into a life rebuilt and reshaped on my own terms. The past had sculpted me, but would no longer define me. I moved forward, steady, unbroken, and finally in control.